my mentor and also dear friend and board seat member on the Unstoppable Foundation, which if you haven't checked that out, check it out. We're having a huge gala as well with Sarah McLaughlin, if I am correct. And of course, I have Henry Winkler coming on the show. So you got the Fonz, Mikey Momola, the Fonz down there. Welcome, Mikey Momola from Florida. Not quite as early, but still significant that you would wake up to do this. And our special guest is Lucille Ossai. She is a speaker and author, best-selling author, and she's right up Dave McCourt's alley, by the way, if I could have recruited him from Ireland, founder of Rethinking Business Communications. Lucille, Dave McCourt wrote a book called Rethink, which really changed my perspective of the entire world, because unless you take a step back and rethink, holy moly, every single major institution has to be rethought now. And how do we rethink something that's changing at such exponential rate? It's kind of like building a war. I hate to use this analogy with Ukraine going on, but it's like building a military ship. When you rethink something in a military ship, it takes 17 years to build it. And we can't even fathom what the technology will be back in 17 months, let alone 17 years. So you are an expert in this, in communications. How do we have to rethink what we're doing in the efforts that we have in business communications?
And thanks for having me on the show, Dave. And I think that's really an important question, because business communication has changed drastically in the past 8 to 10 years. Yeah. When I was in university, the way we used to communicate was completely different. And now, because of all the changes that we're seeing in the world, especially in leadership communication, it's really important to take a step back and prioritize the audience. That is really what I consider the first rule of effective business communication. So we need to rethink our audience, and we really need to tailor our communication in a way that will address their concerns or their needs, because that is the only way that we can get them on board. So it's really important, the environment is changing, a lot of things are changing, especially in communication, but it's really important to keep abreast of these changes so that you can connect with different audiences around the globe. So I would say it would begin with being mindful of the need to rethink and the need to change, and then proceed by considering the audience which you would like to connect with, either inspire into action, or like to change opinions, or you like to create massive movements. So it all begins with being flexible and being open to the change.
You're mute, Blaine. We can't hear you. Mikey, maybe you could take over.
There we go. Okay.
Oh, there you go. Welcome to the show, Blaine.
Well, I was coughing, so I muted myself. So, yeah, it's all about communication. But the point that you're making...
They make a really good point. I think you should write your next book and talk about business communication, because the number one thing that's interfering with our communication is not hitting the mute button.
Hit the mute button.
or not hitting the mute button.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, Virginia Satir said that communication is essentially the ways that we work out common meaning with one another. And unless we've got common meaning, we really don't have a foundation, from which to even begin to communicate. We'll just make a lot of noise. So what are you finding, Lucille? When you're talking about we need to find ways to communicate differently with a different constituency, what kind of meaning distinctions are you noticing that weren't present, say, like 5-10 years ago?
Right. Okay. So what you mentioned about the meaning, we call it shared meaning. So it's really important that what we want to convey is the same as what our audience interprets. So we're just not, sprouting a lot of things or writing a lot of things that doesn't have the shared meaning. And what has changed, I think, now is with the advance of the internet and different apps and so on and so forth, the divide has basically reduced. So you would find someone like me, for example, I'm based in Lagos, Nigeria. I don't know if you know where that's in Africa. I can reach out to Dave because of the beauty of technology. And I really did so. And he was gracious enough to connect and all that. So we'll find that there's now more of a pressure for us to be able to connect with your audience, yeah, and to communicate in a simple, clear manner. So I think that is the shift. So we've sort of pulled back the curtain, yeah, and demystify how difficult effective communication is by just understanding that there's an audience that we need to connect with and trying to tailor our communication in a way that is simple, brief, and clear for the audience to grasp what it is you're trying to convey and to hopefully support you in whatever it is you're trying to achieve. So I think that's the great difference. So there isn't so much a difficulty now to reaching out to anybody in the world. I could do that, Zoom calls or through this medium or by social media. And if I'm trying to connect with somebody and there's already a perceived difficulty, maybe an aloofness in the way the person presents him or herself, then I'm not going to do that, and great opportunities will be missed in collaboration and innovation and so on and so forth. So I think the whole idea of rethinking is trying to get us back to the fundamentals of effective communication, which would be to connect with the audience and to ensure that there's shared meaning. So perceived meaning from the audience should be the same as the meaning you are trying to convey. So Lucille, I think that's as important. Yeah.
I agree with you. In looking at that with regards specifically to effective communication, and like you said, going back to the fundamentals, I wanted to talk to you for a second about a speakers bureau, so virtual keynotes that I know that you're a big part of. Right. How do we properly mesh the old with the new, the fundamentals of effective communication with the new way of doing it virtually rather than sitting in a room with people?
Yeah, there's a difference, and it's really important to know what that difference is, because when we're in face-to-face communication, it's easy to be able to interpret nonverbal cues, so the gestures and so on and so forth. But these cues often become difficult to interpret virtually. So the way I would communicate in an in-person interaction will have to differ from the way I do virtually. So I will introduce things like short breaks. I would speak slower. I would ask more questions. I would try to, ask clarifying questions to understand whether the audience is on the same page with me, and just being sensitive to the fact that not everybody would want to speak. So I may use chat boxes, for example, or other ways to get them to be engaged. Because once you are able to develop trust, even in virtual communication, then it becomes easy for you to be able to connect. It becomes easy for you to be able to spread the message. So there'll be additional things I will need to do virtually, that would ensure that at least I'm able to connect with my audiences. And sometimes it's just as little as asking more questions, or I understand that, or this sounds like something that could be complex. Is there anything you would like me to clarify? Asking questions in the chat, or just getting them to be a bit more engaged, even putting them into breakout rooms as well, which proves to be quite effective, especially in workshops and so on and so forth. And then just really taking a step back and listening and trying to get the opinions of other people in the virtual interaction. So I think that would prove beneficial anytime we're doing keynotes, or anytime we're doing workshops, or anytime we're trying to connect virtually with the audience. More so if members of the audience come from different regions, just like me. So that will really help.
Two things I see, Lucille, from doing so much virtually, whether it's shows or speeches or workshops or masterminds, is one, just the attention of, when you're speaking, I think one of the most difficult things isn't when you see only yourself on the screen. I think most professional speakers can handle that. But I think the most challenging thing when I'm speaking virtually is when there's an administrator sharing the screen with me who's doing all the coordination. And so when you're, laying your heart, soul, mind, and body on the line from your closet, around the world with thousands of people, all you see the administrator do work. I just want to point that out for those who haven't experienced it. But what I want to bring up is, you have a best-selling book, Influence and Thrive. In order to influence and thrive as an author, speaker, coach, all the things that you do as a trainer, Blaine up here or sideways, whichever way you are, he brought up an interesting point in one of our shows. David, don't speak to the audience. You need to know what they're listening for. And I do meetups around the country, even the world, because I want to know what the audience is listening for by, I probably do more hot seat one-on-one coaching, which I'll do at 7 a.m. today again, because I want to know what people are listening for. Sometimes in the online realm, it's such a worldly audience. When we have 63,000 people registered today for our training. I don't know where and who, and I mean, there's no way I would know what they're listening for. But it's very difficult culturally, like you said. How do we speak to these large audiences that, some of the speakers, you can literally get millions of people if you online. How do we speak to a spectrum that's so diverse?
Okay, really, really important. And this brings me back to what I call the fundamentals. Yeah. So if you're going to be speaking before a large audience, virtual audience, for example, I would imagine that prior to that event, you would have gotten some information about the audience. Yeah. Maybe some demographic or where the industry they're coming from and what the pain points or what they hope to learn or to know from your session. So it could just start up with just checking when you start with them, just checking where you're from, just to break the ice and all that. Could you just tell me one thing about your country that I don't really know? And just making yourself open and showing that in your body language that you're really, really curious. And then just try to follow, like I said, the 3 rules. So you have the audience, so just getting to know them, asking some questions, general questions, pause and everything. And then to proceed to the next one, which is, are you communicating in a simple manner? Are you communicating concisely? And is what you're communicating with clear? I call these the 3 beacons of effective communication. So simplicity, brevity, and clarity. Yeah. And I have these beacons at the back of my mind anytime I am communicating, whether it's with my fellow Nigerians or with people outside or beyond my region. So is what I'm saying simple to understand? Is it brief and is it clear? And if I find that I'm speaking for more than 10 minutes at a time, I stop. And I try to ask questions or to get an opinion and all that. And then sometimes encourage people asking questions either in the chat box or raising the virtual hand and so on and so forth. And the final rule is feedback. Yeah. So knowing your audience, rule number 1 is what I'm saying, simple, brief, and clear. Number 2 and number 3, feedback. So just having touch points throughout my session, just asking questions. Does this make sense? And I realize that this might be particular to where I'm from. Is there anyone that has experienced something differently? And just basically tapping into the collective knowledge of your audience. Because Dave, you said you had thousands of people registered for your training. How many?
Over 63,000 now.
Yeah, 63,000. So if you combine the experiences, the combined experience will be more than what you know and what you've lived through. So I always like to drop from that as well, because I always try to learn something new, even though I'm the facilitator of the speaker or whatever. I always try to learn something new from each interaction. And then I think it just sort of flows. It becomes really evident that you're on the same page with them, and that you are just trying to help them and offer value. So I think if we're able to just keep these 3 rules basically at the back of our minds, it becomes easier to connect. In addition to having short breaks and trying to discern some body language cues virtually, we might be difficult but still doable.
Yeah, I think great constructive advice with all 3 of those things, which, even with the amount of speeches that all 3 of us do, I'm sure it's a great takeaway. And I was just thinking, understanding, even when you get to the, hundreds of thousands of people, topic-oriented interest to know your audience, which is such a great piece of advice. You have an incredible keynote in ACE Speakers Bureau for people, especially virtually around the world. Great advice, great book. Everyone reach out. You can reach Lucille at Lucille Ossai. There's the book, Thrive and Influence and Thrive. LucilleOssai.com. Check it out. What, as a speaker, I think the most important type of assistance that you can give as trainer and speaker bureau for virtual speeches, especially. There's a lot of opportunity for everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Come
Thank
back.
you.
We
Thank
really
you.
appreciate it. Have
Thank
a good
you.
night.
You too. Thank you for having me.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much. Take
She was awesome.
Yeah, very good points.
Yeah, we're at the beginning of the day. She's at the end of the day, and there's a certain energy in Nigeria. I know, Blaine, you know, especially too. There's
Yep.
just this unbelievable zest. Thriving is the best word for it. That people are appreciative and thriving throughout the regions of Africa, especially Nigeria. Anyway, we'll bring on the president of the art of perception. Blaine, this one's out of the park, right up your alley. I can't wait. Amy Herman, she is just an amazing person. Welcome, first of all, to Office Hours, and congratulations on your book, Amy.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me. Early morning for you.
Oh, we're up early. Blaine and I are old men, so we get up really early.
It's early for me in New York, but
same with Mike. He's in Florida and ex-New Yorker, ex-lawyer. We love him for both of those reasons.
nice to meet all of you.
Great to meet you. You wrote a book on Fixed, how to perfect the fine art of problem solving, demonstrating a powerful paradigm shift for finding solutions. It's interesting because I want to talk about perception first. And I imagine it's intertwined within the context of your book. First question is, have you studied the Course in Miracles?
I have not.
Interesting. Yeah, I would have thought for sure with the concept. And so this makes it even more interesting for me, for someone that hasn't been exposed to that. Giving meaning to everything we see, and the art of illusions. I have a quote that I sent to Matt about purpose, and I'm hoping I can find it real quickly, but it was along the lines of, the purpose of everything is to prove the illusions I have about myself.
Wow.
And you know, I try to teach mindset, which is basically perception, which is what I'm sure your book talks about in problem solving, our mindset, heart set, and hand set, of how to solve these problems. Do you believe everything on this earth is an illusion, Amy?
You know, I'm probably gonna push back a little bit, because what my book really celebrates and what my work celebrates is creativity of the human spirit. And so the book centers around the work that I do to help people solve problems by learning to look and analyze works of art. And so I'm an art historian and a lawyer, and I've combined the two practical aspects of.
We're gonna have to kick you off the show. We can't take another lawyer up here.
You know what? I'm a recovering.
All three of us. All three of us. We'll let you stay then. We'll let you stay.
Okay, thank you. I should have said I'm a recovering attorney and an art historian. And I like to think that I combine the practical aspects, legal analysis and visual analysis, to create this program. So it's hard for me to characterize art as an illusion, because it's the artist's reality, you know. And so what I do is I use works of art to help people not only improve their engagement with the world, but to help them rethink their perception, their communication, and their observation skills. And now with this book, I want it to help them solve problems. So I'm going to push back a little bit and say, I'm not sure that art is an illusion, but I think it's more of a celebration of the human spirit.
Love it.
Yeah, that whole thing about the human spirit, I love this. Thomas Troward, one of the best philosophers, finest, incredible mind, talked about, when looking at a piece of art, whether it was literally a sunset or the Venus de Milo or the Mona Lisa, if you look at it with the right set of eyes, you will actually see the spirit that is part of that thing. And that's what beauty, he described beauty as the apprehension of the spirit that gave birth to this piece of art.
That's exactly right. And what I have done, I mean, I'm not putting myself down in any way, but I am the connector. I know about the power of art because of my training as an art historian. But when I take two cops and I put them in front of a painting, and one of them says to me, I just love this. I can't tell you why. I just love this. I'm channeling that power of art to someone who's never seen it before and can internalize that power. And with my help and connection, use it to improve the effectiveness of their job. So I am a big believer in the spirit of art, and you don't need any background. You don't need any art history to feel that power of the human spirit. And so I really channel it and I leverage it. And I bring people, shock and trauma nurses and CEOs to look at art with me. And my goal is to have them leave thinking differently about their work because of that art.
Amy, I absolutely agree. Good morning. And
Good morning.
you used a word that I wanted to focus on for a second. You used the word channeling. And I just spent with my wife and 2 dogs about 20 hours driving from the Northeast down to South Beach, Miami here.
Wow.
And so I spent a lot of time listening to Ram Dass and his perceptions and thoughts on awareness and consciousness. And so much of what I hear in what you're saying, and I can't wait to read everything that you've written on this, is expressed in what he's saying, in the celebration of the human spirit, and like you said, the channeling. So when we talk about that, how much of what we perceive in this construct, this known conscious universe that we see, is part of that in essentially taking it for, like you said, that channeling? Because I know a lot of musicians, whether they're musicians or fine artists or photographers or whatever they might be, when you speak to them and you ask them where this expression came from, very often they say, I don't know. It's like they tapped into something. That's the celebration of the human spirit. How does that work?
Well, I'm going to quote a good friend of mine who works in the intelligence community, and he said this so artfully. He said, neurons that fire together wire together. And so when you, and I'm sure other people have said it too, and what I love about works of art, and this applies to music and theater and, video, everything, you're engaging a neuroplasticity in your brain. And when you look at art, your brain is firing in a way that it doesn't, in response to any other stimuli. The same with dance and music. Your brain responds in a way, you're engaging this neuroplasticity. And my hope is that when you're looking at works of art, your neurons are going to fire together so that later on, when you're confronting a problem and you don't know what else to do, you can call on those neurons to wire together to help you solve the problem. So when people say, I'm channeling this, I don't know why I'm responding this way, it's neuroplasticity in their brain that is coming together and they're experiencing something, and it's almost euphoria. I mean, when you hear a piece of music that moves you and you say, oh my God, I feel that music inside, there's a reason. And the same thing happens when you look at a work of art. So I want to believe that neurons that fire together wire together.
Love that. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
And Amy, talking about frequency now, you talked about the police officers that come and look at a piece of art and just innately are on the frequency or the spectrum of that vibration that is represented by this art, and they love it.
Mm-hmm.
And you're a lawyer, a recovering lawyer like Mike and I, extremely pragmatic in our analysis. And
Right.
I'm writing a book right now called Reconciliation. So, you're a perfect character for the reconciliation. Someone that is the president of the art of perception, but yet still trained as a lawyer.
Right.
And it's incredible. I have a philosophy about frequency and channeling, by the way, Michael. When you're at your frequency, or a piece of art has its own frequency, it has the strength of a signal, a spectrum of the signal, and a clarity of a message. 10% approximately, and you're pragmatic, 99% of all statistics are made up. So about 10%, about 10% of the people will automatically resonate with the frequency and say, I love it. They don't even know why. I tell people as a speaker, I could literally get on a stage and say for 30 minutes, and 10% of my audience would come up afterwards and go, that was amazing. I see what you're doing. You're teaching patience, you consistency. Anyway, also 10% are going to hate it, right? So when you get popular, especially in social media, that's the hardest percent to really live with, is 10%, no matter what you say, are not hearing you because of your frequency, and some are very abusive about it. And then 80% need help. They need help they can find the frequency, they're within the spectrum, but they need help. And you've created 3 questions that you must ask to master this, to the problem solving or the frequency that comes from the piece of art. And I'm reading through everything, thinking to myself, this could be a great gift in other areas because everything vibrates and everything's a frequency. And you've come up with these, as a recovering lawyer, I think very 3 pragmatic ways to solve a problem from a frequency. So that's the way I'm looking at it. What are the 3 questions to ask?
There are 3 very simple questions. And again, I learned them from some real linear thinkers, from intelligence analysts. But before I tell you the questions, I just want to reference back to your word pragmatic. Looking at art with cops or with shock and trauma nurses, trauma surgeons, that's all fine and good, but I have to give them something tangible to go back to their work with, because to leave and say, oh, I was inspired looking at works of art, that's going to last 10 minutes over a cup of coffee, and then the first trauma is going to come in and it's all going to go out the window. So it's that pragmatism. It's how do I link that experience of looking at art back to their work? And so I give them this model of 3 questions to ask. A new patient, a new situation, a new problem, a new emergency, any new situation, you ask 3 questions and you can process them in your head very quickly. Number 1, what do I know? What do I definitively know about the situation? Number 2, what don't I know? And you say, well, how do I know what I don't know? Identify what's missing. I don't have this. I don't have another person here. I don't have a connection. I don't know the background. And then the 3rd question follows and says, if I had the opportunity to get more information, what do I need to know? What's the thing that's missing that's so glaring? Do away with everything else. You can ask 1 question, you get 1 piece of information. What is it? And by asking those 3 questions, you can coalesce your thoughts and say, here's what I know, here's what's missing, and this is the 1 piece of information that I have the opportunity. This is what, if you're delegating, this is what you need to go out and find for me so I can solve this problem. And so in looking at, a trauma patient, in looking at a military exercise, in looking at all kinds of things, as soon as you can put those pieces in place, you have a model, you can de-escalate, you can take a deep breath and think, all right, I can do this. And when we're looking at a work of art, we use that model as well. What do I know? And I don't want to hear, well, it was painted by Van Gogh in 1888. That's not what I'm looking for. What do I know about what I see? I see the color blue. I see 3 people. I see a wheat field. What don't I know? Where did this take place? Is there anything behind the house? And if I had more information, if I had the opportunity to get more information, what's the 1 thing I want to know? What's happening over here? Because my eyes are not telling my brain what I'm looking at.
We were taking notes, Blaine and I, because as I see art is frequency, but Mike, he's better at doing it than we are, because he's like Magic Johnson of office hours. He did the no notes.
I love that.
You think as much stuff as we do. Me and Blaine would be able to, pretend like we're listening. Well, we're listening, pretend like we're watching. Anyway, Blaine, we have time for 1 more question. This is fascinating.
Viktor Frankl, I mean, everybody's heard this, man's search for meaning, that, we're always striving for finding meaning. And my experience of looking at art or listening to symphony is, kind of what's the meaning that's kind of hidden in there. But I've started to think about this in a different way. I think what we really look for is the experience of aliveness.
Yes.
That experience, the experience of being, you talked about euphoria. And that's the move towards, okay, let me discern the meaning here that cuts me off from that experience of pure aliveness. So if I can just get myself out of the way and grok the experience, grok the spirit that's there, I can work with this. And I love these 3 questions because they can allow me to just bypass, that whole process and go, okay, just show up.
I love what you say, to get out of our own way. We often stand in our own way. And I want to share something with you, because children have no filter. They say whatever is on their mind.
So does my wife.
I'm overjoyed about the book Fixed. But I have this book coming out in September, and it's a book for young adults it's called Smart, Use Your Eyes to Boost Your Brain. And the reason I tell you about it is because you break down the 3 ideas of this book and they apply to adults as well. I'm using works of art to teach young adults how to see, how to think about what they see, and how to talk about what they see. And that's what adults need to do as well. And again, I'm using the experience of looking at works of art to as a model and sort of an out of the box template to think about how we need those everyday skills. So for adults, it's using art to ask those 3 questions. And for kids, it's about using art as data and a mechanism to help them do that.
When's that book coming out, Amy?
This book is coming out in September. I just got
awesome.
a copy. So this is coming out in September.
And you released one in December, though, called Fix, correct?
Yes, I did. The book Fixed. That's my book for adults. I love it. It's dense. There's beautiful works of art, but it really hones in on the idea of how can the process of looking at works of art help us solve all the problems that we're facing.
Incredible. I think if you analogously look at art as a frequency or vibration, it can even extend to our previous guest of how do we speak virtually when you understand that frequency and understanding what your audience knows, what they don't know, and what they need to know. And I think it applies to so many things. What a great takeaway for the day. Amy Herman, author, artist, lawyer, president of the Art Perceptions. She's incredible. Come back. You are so fascinating and educational to us. I love, I feel like Napoleon Hill. That's all I got to say. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It was lovely meeting all of you. Happy weekend.
Thank you, Amy.
Awesome perspective. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Man,
Love to see if
some
we can
people
get her
coming
to,
here. Go ahead,
I
Mike.
was going to say, I'd love to see if we can get her to speak down here for Art Basel or something in Miami. She's such a great perspective on things.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Great idea. She it's interesting, Mike, you'll get this too, but Blaine has this in him, right? The combination of linear thought with the creative belief. And it's always an interesting reconciliation. I when someone can take this completely woo-woo, spiritual, ethereal illusion and break it down to like very pragmatic, simple, which is why she is capable of writing a kid's book, because she obviously can take hyper complex frequencies and put them down to a very simple methodology that she can explain to a 6-year-old. And that's truly, an objective of mine always is to widen the spectrum so I get from 6 to 600. Anyway, here he is waiting in the wings. He's waiting in the West Wings, no pun intended. Ben West, he's the co-head of concept development at Juxtapose, and Juxtapose VC, a leading VC capital forum for disrupting businesses. And we were talking about the times are changing and we have to rethink, but we don't have time to strategize because by the time we rethought it, strategize it, and executed on it, we have to re-strategize, re-execute, and rethink it. And when you're dealing with venture capital, it gets a little bit gnarly because people are losing money along the way. And you can see this disruption, with world disruption, with, the Putin effect on the stock market, on crypto, all the different things that can occur in the investment world. So, it's interesting to pick the, disruption part of venture capital. And I was wondering, what have you learned at Juxtaposed where the opportunities lie within disruption?
I think it's a great question. I think we sort of see our opportunity as one to bring a really systematic approach to that question. So if you think about the process of starting a company, the process of identifying an opportunity for a new business, we think that all those problems can be broken down. We can actually develop specialized talent that can solve each one of those types of questions. And then as far as opportunities, there's a process that goes on in most major markets where assumptions become obsolete. Businesses are actually built around those obsolete assumptions. And then it really takes somebody to go into that market, deeply understand it, and ask a bunch of dumb questions like, why do things work this way? Why have we set up all the companies in this industry according to these rules, or to work this way, or to serve customers this way, when in fact customers don't want to be served that way anymore? Technology allows us to run the business completely differently. And our firm basically runs a systematic process that I co-lead that basically has a team of investment professionals going and looking for those opportunities, as well as a team of designers think about what we might do differently. So there's the basic theme of our firm is bringing a more industrialized approach to entrepreneurship. And so when we do work in a category, it might take us 2 years of doing really heavy duty work to find an investable opportunity. An investable opportunity for us is a really big market, incredibly attractive economic opportunity in that market, but then an opportunity to also reinvent the value proposition. So use technology in a new way, really rethink what do consumers want and what are they not getting in that particular industry. And then we actually go through a process to partner with a really exceptional CEO. And so the real, I think, secret sauce of our firm is being able to work with folks who run businesses that are thousands or tens of thousands of people, who normally wouldn't be seen doing a startup or building from scratch. So certainly some of them would. Some of them are extremely entrepreneurial, or some of them have built from scratch multiple times in the past. But we can partner with those individuals, do a lot of the work alongside them to further validate that opportunity. And then we've got the combination of a really big opportunity that we've deeply vetted and a CEO who's just capable of really doing anything, right? Many of these individuals have been public company CEOs. They've already created enormous wealth for themselves, but we can partner with them to go after one more really big opportunity that has the potential to be career defining for somebody who's already had enormous success. And at that point, it's pretty hard to not do well. If you have a great opportunity and you have the best CEO who could possibly be working on that, it's like pretty magical at that point.
I'll jump in. Good
Yeah,
morning,
thanks,
Benjamin.
Mike.
Yeah, Benjamin, I don't know if you saw me go like this when Dave asked his question and you said great question, but just a heads up, we keep track of great questions. So I gave Dave a point for that great question. I want to give you an extra.
And comparison is the thief of joy. So Mike and our relationship is very tenuous at this time because we're so close in points.
And in height.
Yeah, very close in height too. Both are unfortunate.
I not only wanted to acknowledge that great question, but I want to give you an extra point for using the word gnarly in your great question. So that was
Yeah.
Benjamin, I wanted to focus on what you're saying for a second with regard to the tech or the company and the CEO. And so often we see, you just talked about when things are great and things are harmonious, how well things will work, but sometimes they're not. And have you seen in your experience, and does your firm have an opinion with regard to when things aren't perfect? How do you handle that? I know that you can't handle it all in this question now with a few minutes, but my question is there something that's more or less likely in terms of the tech or the company versus the CEO to be an indicator of success versus the other?
Yeah, we believe very strongly that the problem with most entrepreneurship, and I would say the biggest problem in venture is our CEOs and management teams that aren't really capable of really running hard at the opportunity that's in front of them. And that's why we're extremely picky about who we partner with. And our partners are super picky about who they partner with too. And so one of our core values as a firm is talent is everything. We believe that so strongly. We just think about it all the time. And we'll often, people will call each other out in meetings for a moment when there might be a compromise on talent, or we might be saying, oh, we should hire this person and move on. Like, that's a huge red flag for us. I think there's and the CEO is the most important part of that, right? And so we've been extremely fortunate as a firm. We have a pretty unique talent process where when we're getting to know a CEO and a founder, we go extremely deep in their background. So we know the names of their brothers and sisters. We know we do 50 reference calls on them that are often 45 minutes or an hour long. We're basically getting to know the full 360 picture of that individual, and they're doing the same thing on us, right? So these are people with extremely high opportunity costs. They deeply get to know the work that we've done. They deeply get to know the people we've worked with in the past, and that process is pretty virtuous. You tend to have a really strong talent flywheel. As soon as you commit yourself to working with the absolute best people, other incredible people want to work with you as well. And so that's really been, I think, our flywheel as a firm. But it's something we're very proud of, that we've never had to part ways with a CEO. So all the CEOs we've worked with are still in place. And actually, the vast majority of the early management team members we partnered with around that CEO are also still in place. I think we probably have the lowest turnover in our companies on average of any venture fund. And it's something we're really proud of, but that we approached it in a very intentional way.
That for me speaks to the question of culture, just how much the development of an intentional culture is in the vetting of the management team that you're setting up here. I think it's one thing to have expertise operationally. The idea, and this is what I love about the studios. You've got an ideal that shows up as a company idea, and then we look at how do we create a viable business around that ideal. And at some point in time, and this is where I think studios actually can hit the mark more than any other venture VC group, is that you tend to, and I'm gonna just position this as an assertion and push back on me, Benjamin, if this isn't the fact. But you start off with a company with an ideal, and then you get the business going, and the ideal leads the way for a long period of time. And at some point in time, the business becomes more important than the ideal of the business. Where does that, or does that at all happen in the migration to viability as you're setting stuff up? And this is why the culture becomes so important for me. Yeah. So where are we at on that spectrum?
Well, I'd say that, I think our firm, and I would very strongly hold the view that talent is the most important thing, and getting the right management team working together in the right way is the most important thing. But I think typically the cultural problems that are often ascribed to startups, you hear stories about people, who are relatively early in their career, in many cases being tasked with an opportunity that's frankly beyond them. In the context of our businesses, we're typically building a management team that are really consummate executives. They're great people. They actually form great cultures. And I think one thing that we're extremely proud of in our businesses is how strong the cultures are. They're like instantaneous mafias in a lot of sense. People talk about the PayPal mafia. This is like, each one of these companies has their own kind of mafia characteristics. And it happens pretty early because everyone, talent recognizes talent. People are excited to work together. And in the context of a startup, there's very little politicking. No one's going to make money unless the thing really, really, really works. And so people tend to row in the same direction pretty quickly. And the number one success factor is just getting extraordinary people into the business. I do think the question on whether, the extent to which the idea drives the business versus the team and culture drive the business, we're of the mind that there's a set of really important decisions you need to make with regard to the idea. And that's the market that you're playing in, and then the initial, what we refer to as the wedge business. So we typically think of our business in two stages. The first is what we call the wedge, where we have a deeply understood, deeply underwritten business that we're stepping into day one. In some ways, that looks almost more like a private equity business, where really strong unit economics, big market, very clear path to acquiring a bunch of customers, really, really high returns on capital. But then we also have something we refer to as the squint, and the squint is somewhat less known, but it's the thesis that takes the business from being, call it, $1 billion enterprise value business to a 10 or $100 billion enterprise value business. And that is actually, there's no necessarily way of knowing what that's going to be, but what you're putting yourself in position to do, and that there's a set of directions you can take when the business is at scale that are really exciting, and you can think about designing the business, designing the technology stack in the right way to position yourself well to run really hard at those squint opportunities. But I'd say relatively early on, the CEO and the management team are making pretty strong refinements to the original thesis. They're generally honed pretty closely to the one that we've co-created with them, but it's inevitably there are pretty meaningful improvements that great CEOs and great management teams will make to the core thesis, or in many cases it's additional opportunities that they recognize they can pursue earlier than we anticipated. So I'll give you an example. We have a business in our portfolio called Orchard. Orchard is in the home buying and selling space. You can think of it as a kind of Carvana for the home space. So you're probably familiar with iBuyers who will basically take your home from you for a price. Orchard is actually there with you for the full life cycle. So they help you buy your next home. They give you a backstop offer on your previous home. It allows you to move from one home to the next with 100% certainty. And so in a housing market like this, it's incredibly valuable for consumers because nobody wants to get stuck not being able to sell their old house. And they often can't make a cash offer on their next house without the liquidity from the previous home. So Orchard solves that whole problem. They also support all of the ancillary transactions along the way. So you can do your mortgage through Orchard with the click of a button. You can get home insurance with the click of a button. You can get title insurance with the click of a button. You can get those things on your own if you want, but most consumers want a single point of contact, a single neck to choke, so to speak. And Orchard really gives that to them. In the case of Orchard, we weren't sure how quickly they'd be able to add all these ancillary transactions and be able to do something like title insurance, which is actually relatively complex, or originate mortgages, which is also super complex. And the CEO, Court Cunningham, is just an extraordinary human being, and he ran really hard at these opportunities quite early. And in most cases, when you think about these ancillary opportunities, Court had it up and running within the first 24 months. And so he really built almost 7 businesses at once while growing really quickly. Today Orchard is a monster business, present in 10 markets in the US, but growing incredibly fast. And it's something that would only be possible to build a business of that complexity if you had an individual like Court running the business. So we're super proud of that company.
Yeah, you have many great companies because of the people in the system that you have to use those people is extraordinary. And HIMS is one of them I know as well. Ben West, co-head of concept development at Juxtapose, which is an important component, obviously, to understand how all of this juxtaposes into making more money, helping more people, and having more fun. Ben, come back and join us, my friend. Thank you so much for the great insight, and congratulations on a compassionate, capitalistic model that seems to be working based off of people, not profits. We appreciate you.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Ben.
Thanks, Ben.
Thanks, Ben.
All right. Well, we got get Blaine into the makeup room, so we got takeaways.
He doesn't need any makeup.
Hey,
Very good.
Scrubbing.
Scrubbing. Blaine, what's your takeaway for the day?
Well, the last question I asked Ben, really kind of spoke to, for me, what, the soul of the business. Does the soul of the business remain intact as it's actually, developing? And it's that aspect of soul that comes through all the way through, and soul, spirit, aliveness. So the thing that I'm taking away today has, all 3 of our guests today actually spoke to this in their own unique ways. When I'm looking at art, and does it bring me alive? How do I feel about me when I'm in the presence of this masterpiece? Do I feel alive? The same is true with speaking. Is there aliveness in the presentation that people can connect with? Because people connect with aliveness. Whether it's a startup, do I feel alive when I'm a part of this? Do I feel alive when I'm watching a sunset or the Mona Lisa, or do I feel alive in the communication process? So that would be the one nugget for me is, don't look for meaning, look for aliveness.
Blaine, mine is related to that in so many ways. You guys heard me mention Ram Dass, who I devoted my time to listening to on this drive down. And if I had to kind of distill everything, hours and hours of what I heard, it would be that everything that you think you are is actually just a very, very small part of who you really are. And when we listened to the guests today, we see with Benjamin, and he said the great CEOs or the great management team, and with Amy, the great artist who can express things in a way that others can't, and with Lucille, these A bureau speakers, they've tapped into something. And what they've tapped into is the essence of who they are, just a little bit more. The same way they say that we only use perhaps 10% of our brain. Imagine if we could use a little more. But imagine what your potential would be if we spent a little more time on ourselves, learning a bit more about ourselves and the essence of who we are, and then we were able to give that to the world. So that's my takeaway for today.
I love it. And mine's a takeaway for being an audience. And the 3 components of being an audience is, what are they seeing? What are they thinking? And what are they listening for? I think those are the three components of being able to connect to and through an audience, expanding and accelerating upon, what Blaine taught me is, hey, Dave, don't speak to an audience, understand what they're listening for, understand what they see, think, and of course, what they're listening for is my takeaway. I do want to point out one thing over here in the notes. Bizbro, he put rule number 1, don't have a partner. 2, make sure your partner can find you if you do have a partner, which I found odd. 3, refer to rule number 1 if you fail to pass rule number 2. I had learned from my father, which is why I had to point this out to give respect to him. He always told me about partnerships. Rule number 1, don't have a partner. 2, if you do have a partner, make sure they have more money than you. 3, refer to rule number 1 if you fail to pass rule number 2. And
That's right.
I just wanted to point that one out for everybody. Anyway, my boys, I will see you all very soon. We are having a launch party, inviting our entire audience. It's going to be an extraordinary event, complete mash. It's going to be amazing on a week from yesterday, Thursday, March 3rd, in Orange County, VIP. Please email me, david@dmeltzer.com if you want to come to our party. Blaine, Bartlett, see you in a couple moments. Michael Popola, I will talk to you this tomorrow. So
Fantastic.
Awesome, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Have a great day.
Great seeing
Great
you,
show.
Mike.
Break a leg.
Thanks for joining us, Blaine, substituting for David Marino, of course. All right, everyone. I only have 2 things to say. 7 a.m. Pacific time. Training today is hot seat coaching with the incredible Alicia Covey. And 2, be more interested than interesting. Be kind to your future self and do good deeds. We'll see you in about an hour and 8 minutes. Over 60,000 people joined us to register. David@dmeltzer.com. Thank you.